One.
Hi, welcome to God with George Ortega and Josh Bond. We've been talking about what is God and how do we have a relationship with God? How do we talk to God? And we've been exploring a whole lot of concepts to really expand our idea and thus our capacity, our potential, our awareness for having a relationship with God and being able to talk to God. We've covered in the last few episodes all sorts of concepts of, what is God, what is religion, how do we relate to religion, how do we navigate all the different types of religions and ideas of religion, and all of this in this pursuit of really enriching our lives, becoming more happy, more successful, more alive people. And we're going to continue to do that in this episode. And take it away, George.
Okay, so we're gonna do like 1 minute each.
4 minutes.
4 minutes. Well, I
Oh,
just
I just did a minute. Go
right.
ahead.
All right. Well, I'll do the rest of this minute. Then you go through 4 minutes. All right. So
Okay.
basically, yes. And our challenge, as always, is to keep it like as tightly about God as possible. To just like have our focus not, yes. I mean, we got to talk about the world, religion. There's a lot of problems and stuff. But I think part of the theory behind this series is that the better we connect with God, the more able we'll be to do whatever it is we want to be, create a better world, understand religion better, get along with people better. But again, to the extent that we understand better, God better, and connect to God better, I think that it will benefit us across the board.
Yeah, George. And, one way George and I have been doing that together, as we've been doing these episodes, this series, right? And we've been doing some even more expansive work on our idea, our concepts of God, to include all of these illusions, this illusory aspect of free will, and even consciousness in the self, like we traditionally think of it, and a lot of religions still think of it, right? And so, we started out this episode with this agreement that we're going to do 4 minutes each, go back and forth. And my mind, for whatever reason, just said, "Oh, I'm going to do a minute," and then it's George's turn, right? So, looking at our relationship with God and our seeking God and wisdom from God, and that idea, we have to understand that this is just all causality playing out, or consciousness, and it may be weird consciousness, or consciousness that says, okay, let's do that, and then does something completely different like 10 seconds later. And it's just fun. We got to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so I just did it again, right? So I'm last episode we did a minute. My mind's still programmed to do a minute, right? So George is trying to get me to do 4 minutes because he's a good guy. He wants to hear me speak. Um, I've gone through this process, right? This departing from these aspects of God, this idea of God and religion that didn't serve me. And I found, I tried it for a long time. I did the different practices, the rituals, and participated in the communities. And, I found that it just didn't work for me, right? And I had to make this relationship with God, this idea of God and talking to God, more personal, and this expansive to broader concepts, right? And that's ultimately how I connected with George here, and why we started this series, because there are so many ideas and concepts of God that, when we look at the broader picture of where we're going as a species, how we're trying to make a better society, and make the best possible versions of ourselves, then we start to realize, you know this consciousness that we is evolving to this broad understanding of reality that includes all the laws of, not just chemistry, biology, physics, but also science, all of science and psychology, right? And we can be empowered, as little microcosms of God, to integrate from a broader perspective, right? And for me, as I've done that, right, and kind of departed the dogma and the boxed in ideas of God, it's created a much more expansive view that allows me to love myself, create essentially love consciousness in my mind, to love myself, understand why I do the things I do that I don't want to, that I, why I fail in the ways that I do, right? And also love other people, right? And just have much more grace, have just a much more fun time with life, because we're all making, mistakes and learning from our errors, all along. And unfortunately, we've been taught to blame ourselves, shame ourselves, feel guilt, feel flawed, when, really, if we look at it, this ideas of science and psychology that the new religions essentially is what they are, have come up with, reinforce. They're not combative against the old ideas of God. They reinforce our relationship with God, and this idea of being able to love ourselves, see causality, understand causality, and love ourselves unconditionally and love each other unconditionally when it doesn't go the way we want it to.
Excellent. A lot of times, like I take walks through town, and it's my desire to talk with God. Just have basically not around people, whatever. And if people are close, like, just like whatever, but like to have a conversation. Because like if you live in the country, or just like even in this, there's not, White Plains is a small city. So you could walk around, you could be talking to God verbally, nobody's knowing, you talk, or people could think that you have like a thing on, you're talking with someone on the phone. But anyway, it's like I do this, it's extremely productive. But then the question is, like, a lot of times I'm not able to, like, I've been noticing over the last couple of weeks, and I think it's maybe because of like the politics and everything that's going on in the world, I haven't been able to perhaps have the peace of mind. I'm just guessing for the reason. But the reason I'm explaining this is because, like, to bring God into this, it's like God has had me during these times, several times, I say to myself, like, oh, I want to talk to God. Let me talk to God now. Should I talk to him? And I end up not talking to God. And it's God that is like, this is like surreal. God is having me want to talk to God. And then God is having me not be able to talk to God. And this, God does this all the time. I mean, in a lot of ways. And you got to wonder, you got to think God has a sense of humor. I mean, like, I don't know. You get a kick out of, like, all right, I'm going to make you want something, but I'm not going to give it to you. I'm not like, so, but anyway, so like, it's really, in terms of, Josh was talking about, like, when we think of God in the most expansive way possible. God being in people and emotions and experiences and knowledge and in everything. Whereas, like, I'm working on that also. But right now, again, when I take my walks, I want to be able to, like, talk to God when I want to. And I mean, like, think about it. When I'm not blaming myself for this, and God isn't allowing me, let's say, to talk to him, or her, whatever, in one time, I'm trying to call God her, as much as possible, because I think we've called God him, over the last 2 millennia, at least 3 millennia. And I think it's probably wiser to call God her, because I think the her aspect of God is probably more evolved than the he aspect. So, but anyway, so, like, I'm trying to, like, talk to God, and and sometimes I'm finding and I'm not able to, and basically I'm going till 18, right,
Uh,
Josh?
tw- uh, uh, 20 or
Oh,
10, whichever you're at.
I
Yeah,
was supposed to go
keep
to
going.
20, so I went one
You got,
over. All right.
no, or you got one more minute. Go ahead. One more minute.
Okay. All right. So anyway, so yeah, the idea is, like, if we're thinking that we have a free will, then we're thinking to ourselves, well, I'm trying to do this and I can't, and it's my will. Whereas, like, basically, when we understand we have free will, I'm trying to talk to God. God isn't letting me talk to God. All of a sudden, the question becomes, what? Two questions. Why is God having me want to talk to God and not being able to talk to God? And along with that, comes the question, well, maybe I don't really want to talk to God, which is kind of like surreal anyhow, because, like, if I really don't want to talk to God, why does God put thoughts in my mind suggesting that I do want to talk to God? So again, when you see reality in this way, you see it's much more amazing than we see it under this free will perspective.
Yeah, George, this is, all what you've been saying. I've just been thinking about this illusion of consciousness, as I call it. You kind of relate to it as this illusion of personal consciousness, why our mind has the thoughts it does is beyond ourself, right? And so from this illusion of consciousness and this illusion of personal self and this illusion of free will, from that, like the next logical step is this illusion of what human relationships really are, right? They're supposed to be this catalyst for us to know God and talk to God and have a relationship with God better through each other, right? And so each little piece of consciousness, right? You like you say, I have this desire to talk to God, but I can't make myself do it, right? This is very much like Paul said, in the Bible, he has this desire to be holy and do the right things, but he can't make himself do it and he's beating himself up, right? Realize that this is going on in all of our relationships, all of our human relationships, not just with God, right? So we may have a desire to treat somebody lovingly or say something lovely or lovingly, or just having a conversation with somebody we love or live with, or somebody we just met on the street, we and just enrich their lives and appreciate them as another human being, but we can't make ourselves do it for whatever reason, right? And this is because, usually we're overly self-conscious. We have this illusion of self and free will that, oh, I want to, so I should be able to. And we start, putting pressure on ourselves, whatever it is, and it doesn't work. We just have to be lost in the moment. We have to just let ourselves get lost in the moment of, oh, this feeling feels so good. I'm going to talk to this person. I'm going to share this feeling, right? With no judgment, with no strings attached. And, just be there, just live life out, right? But if we have this overcritical, over self-analysis of, oh, I have to say the perfect thing, I have to get it just right, or they're going to blame me or judge me, then all of a sudden we're stuck in our head and we can't get the words out, and then we can't figure out why we can't do the thing that we want to do, and then we start blaming ourselves for that, and we just start piling on this, these illusions of that of what we are that aren't true. They aren't the true causality of God, you know putting us on this planet, giving us this consciousness that responds to things in the environment, that responds to feelings inside us, right? Responding to this stimuli, instead we're so often taught by, whatever it is, drama on TV or news or politics or religion, to blame ourselves when things don't go right, and that makes us overcritically and stifled, right? We need to free ourselves and be like little children, right? And just be, present and aware and just express what we're feeling with no judgment toward what we're feeling, and not expecting the other person, or God to judge us. And when we do that, then we start communicating more. And if anything we say is wrong, but we express it with love and gratitude and grace and peace, then the other person or God is going to feel that and see that, and they're not going to, respond in a way that's out of their own insecurities to stifle us further, right? And this is, one of the most amazing things in existence is our ability to communicate lovingly, enjoy things, whether it's people, conversations, or, a movie or a book or, a band, whatever it is, to just get lost in our potential for, this relationship with this stimuli that's coming in through all of our senses and just invigorating our being, right? And this is how we have a relationship with God.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that anytime we're interacting with another person, with a group of people, we're interacting with God. And it's important to keep that in mind, because that brings up a lot of surreal kinds of realizations. For example, God is everything, God knows everything. But God, as manifested through us and whoever we're interacting, conversing with, we don't know everything. In other words, like God is kind of like constraining his knowledge. So like God in God's totality not only knows everything we're going to say, but is actually making us say whatever we're going to say and feel whatever we're going to feel, relative to the interaction action. But yeah, it's like it's like, we're part of God that for whatever reason is not allowed to know everything. Because it's conceivable that God could, well, I mean, think about it. If we knew everything, then like what, there would be no reason for anything. I mean, think about it. You're talking to someone, right? You know everything, they know everything. So like, the conversation isn't really necessary. You know what it's about, if it's a 10-minute, everything about it. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say, because like, again, we're trying to figure out this reality where we're all actors, God's the author, God's the puppeteer. And this is what it's about. It's like, for this world to exist as it does, God has to limit some of God's being, within us. We are God, we're part of God. We're just not the parts of God that know everything and control everything. And again, that's a kind of like a mind-blowing realization that another way to see this, again, because, to understand God is to understand reality and our relationship to reality. So when you understand that we don't have a free will, not just that we don't have a free will, that everything that happens is a result of cause and effect. Josh has been talking about this before, this idea that like everything that happens is a result of this causal chain of events that stretches back to before we were born, to the Big Bang and whatever came before that. Then you realize that it's not just about our not having free will. Nothing has a free will. The weather doesn't have a free will. Every physical event in the universe that has ever happened, none of it has ever had a free will. It's all been an amazing movie. So that is an amazing thought. Josh, I got distracted. Am I supposed to speak until 10?
You're good. You got 40 more seconds.
Excellent, till 10. All right. So anyway, and that's, and again, like, obviously, I mean, we'll go over this a lot. We don't get things right. And if I believed in free will, I'd blame myself for not, keeping track of the time well enough. Fine, I'd rather like do things like this accurately, correctly, but it's a blessing to rather than blame myself, ask myself, why does God make us do stuff like that? And fortunately, like when you get this, you kind of like, you find humor in it. You don't blame yourself. It's a curiosity. And that's another kind of like benefit of understanding God and our relationship with God much more accurately.
Yeah, George. I mean, we have this idea of free will and consciousness that's just such nonsense, right? Even this idea that, oh, I made one mistake, I can only make one, or maybe I can make three, and then if I make the same mistake 3 times, then 3 strikes, I'm out, right? All these cliche dogma nonsense that religion, the government, politics embraces. That's these people don't have scientists, they don't have psychologists, who do laboratories with real human beings to see exactly how long does it take to psychologically condition a person to change their ways, even when that person wants to change, even when that person wants to heal addiction or depression or ADD.
Bring God into this.
So, right. So realizing, just like religion has always talked about God, and God provides this understanding, this relationship to God. You pray about it, you read scripture, you speak to God about it, right? That's always been the ideal, their understanding. Well, now we realize, oh, it's even much more than that. It takes a whole lot more patience, a whole lot more grace, a whole lot more love, understanding, diligence to understand the sciences, right, and practice. And ultimately we have to make this fun. We have to enjoy this process. We have to have humor about it. When we make fun of ourselves, don't take the self too seriously. Don't take each other too seriously, except for this aspect of loving each other, because when we love each other, we're loving God. When we love each other's mistakes, we're loving God. We're loving this relationship with God of understanding causality, right? Because when we do that, I guarantee you, I promise you, when we make a mistake, we're going to love ourselves, right? because we're going to have practice loving each other through mistakes, hardship, whatever it is, right? And this is ultimately what understanding, knowing God has always been about. For tens of thousands of years, as humans have, sought to understand God, sought to understand reality, prayed to God, given their concerns, their struggles to God, in hopes that it would return some awareness, some peace, some grace, right? Some relief of anxiety, right? And so there's no reason we should give up on this, because, I tried for a while, right? If you think science is going to solve all your problems and you're going to be a superhuman tomorrow if you just go to science, or just go to some other religion, it's not going to happen, right? And, this capacity that we have for seeking God, seeking answers in God, knowing God in this more expansive way is, is just one more step, right? It's not this turning from God. It's not this pagan evil thing, right? Not that even paganism is evil. I'm not trying to demonize that word. It's another whole nother discussion. It is this broader realization of God that is scriptural, is in most scriptural texts, of God being everything, the creator of everything, the cause of everything, always present, right? And, it is this true, I believe, understanding of God that some of our ancient, forebears realized and were trying to explain, as they went through these profound enlightenment mystical experiences of the true nature, the true non-dual nature of reality.
Right. I was just thinking that sometimes a lot of us don't relate with God, don't want to relate with God. I think sometimes in my personal experience, I feel this. Sometimes I just don't want to talk with God. And for some people, it's like they never want to talk with God. And, you have to wonder, why is this? And naturally, this is God doing this all. But basically, in a lot of people's minds, and maybe we need to talk about this, maybe do some episodes on why this is. But the idea is like, God is everything. So every horrible thing that has ever happened to you, to anyone you know, to anyone historically, is the result is attributable to God. God is the author of all that. And, personally, so that I'm not perpetually angry with God, I choose to tell myself, well, I'm not either intelligent enough or knowledgeable enough to be able to fairly judge God, and that helps me to not be angry with God. But I think for those of us who have those feelings, that so many, I imagine a lot of atheists are atheists because it's not that they don't believe in God. I think it's that they are so angry with God that they refuse to interact with God. But if it's like, let's say you have a parent or parents, right? I mean, like it just makes it's wiser to see the good in them, to kind of like relate to them rather than ignoring them or evading them, to not, with God is the same thing. I mean, like, our parents are not perfect. They have our faults. We're wise to kind of like cultivate a very positive feeling with them and to want to relate to them as much as possible. The same thing with God, that we would prefer that God made everything perfectly virtuous, blissful, that everyone was living in harmony and peace. And it's not the way it is, which is unfortunate. And I think perhaps as humanity, as we evolve our understanding of God, our understanding of our world and our relationship to God, maybe the reasons for all, the pain and suffering that has happened to us, maybe the reasons will become more evident. The religions of today kind of like, they come up with reasons, but for example, let's say, well, we suffer because we've sinned and this is our punishment. Yes, that's part of the answer, but that's not the complete answer, because that's not acknowledging that, yes, we do things wrong, we do sins and we're punished, but it's not our fault. In other words, God is making us do what we do that's wrong. So as we gain a clearer, stronger understanding of why things happen in the world, of this idea that God really makes everything that happens happen, then we begin to ask these more difficult questions. Well, why isn't everything perfect? Why isn't everyone perfectly happy and virtuous? And this is what part of this series is about. The churches, synagogues, mosques, they don't really address this that much. They're just like, they're a few thousand years in the past. But again, moving forward, I think the more we seek to understand God and get close to God with, through this kind of communication, the better we'll understand things and the better our world will be.
Yeah, George. I mean, it's unfortunate that this, kind of divisive nature has happened. And, you know, if we look at the tree of the evolution of religion, there's several good versions online. I encourage anybody to look at it. It shows how religion has sprouted off into many, now thousands of branches of religion. But if we look at it, religion has always gone through this process of schisming, essentially breaking off into different branches, right? And I've come to appreciate that much more than I used to, right? And I don't think we have to look at it from a divisive lens. We have to look at it as this idea that, you know, the evolution of consciousness, the evolution of our consciousness and thus God's consciousness seeks out novelty. It seeks out essentially just like science does, right? New experiments to see, what'll work and what doesn't, right? And some things work for some people, some things work for other people, whether it's different forms of morality, but certainly happiness and enjoyment, and prosperity, and all of these are relationships to God and and reality. um and so it's just a logical next step to integrate this, these ideas of science and philosophy and culture and even politics into our worshiping God, our relationship with God, and understanding reality, understanding ourselves and each other, through this God lens, right? And there's no reason that we shouldn't, involve all of these tools if they serve us in any possible way, or if they allow us to serve each other and enhance each other's lives. And I think we're going to continue to explore this, through the next episodes, and really figure out how to use all of these tools to have a better relationship with God.